Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rakha Kodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And in this lesson, we're going to go into the book of 1 Kings, the 14th chapter. And in here, deals with a couple of things, namely the judgment, right, the Lord ends up bringing against Jeroboam, concerning his son, all right, and so on. But, we're pretty much around this time where it's not quite at the point where, you have the Assyrians dominating, right, because we know as we keep on reading, they tend to become a dominant power in this region, start to expand, eventually subject Israel under them. And in some of these chapters as we go into, there were certain encounters with them. I believe Ahaz, during the time of Ahaz's reign, there is some contact there as well, and then it goes on from there. So at this point, there's still the neighboring nations, right? The Syrians, for example, which they also play a role. They become adversarial to us, but not quite yet. Okay, so this is 1 Kings chapter 14, verse 1. I believe Jeroboam is somewhere around the time of, let's look up, maybe the 900s or so. I would think they placed that it's, what's that, the 10th century? Let's take a look. Yeah, so they placed him around his reign from 931 to about 910/901 BC, circa. So approximations. And I believe that should be the 10th century based on how, the timeline goes in the BC era. Let's see, 10th century BC. Oops. Yeah, so it's the period from 10,000 BC down to 901 BC. Cool. So let's get into it. 1 Kings 14 and 1. At that time, Abijah, the son of Jeroboam, fell sick. And this is after, as we read in the previous chapter, the Lord had sent the prophet to go and go to the northern kingdom and go and prophesy concerning what would happen, with all the idolatry that was going on over there. And the Lord told him not to eat or drink anything and not to go back the same way he came from. He ended up disobeying, right, by being deceived by another prophet. And then he ended up facing judgment for that. So verse 2, it says, And Jeroboam said to his wife, Arise, I pray thee, and disguise thyself, that thou be not known to be the wife of Jeroboam, and get thee to Shiloh. Behold, there is Ahijah the prophet, which told me that I should be king over this people. And I forget the exact chapter it was in, maybe 11 or so, or 12. Probably 11, where we remember Ahijah, right? He took hold of the garment that was on Jeroboam and parted it into 12 parts and prophesied unto him the message of the Lord concerning how he would be king over a portion of Israel. Verse 3, and take with thee 10 loaves and cracknels and a cruse of honey. Let's take a look at that. Cracknels. What's that about? Crumbled thing easily crumbled, crumbs, apparently a kind of hard biscuit or cake. Sounds nice. All right. And a cruse of honey, and go to him. He shall tell thee what shall become of the child. And Jeroboam's wife did so, and arose and went to Shiloh. And let's actually get a nice geographical Shiloh Bible map. Where are we at? Okay. Let's get a nice little okay, here we go. So in Ephraim, oops. They have it here in Ephraim. This portion or this region right here. Once again, it's an approximation. Okay, and what I want to do is where are we? Shiloh. All right, let's look at that in the dictionaries and see if we can get a bit more information on that. Because we know where it is, right? We understand the significance of it, but sometimes there's a bit more context you can get. So we have here Shiloh, generally understood as denoting the Messiah, pursuant to Genesis 49 and 10. Okay, I think let's look more at this definition in terms of location. Shiloh, a place of rest, a city of Ephraim on the north side of Bethel, from which it is distant 10 miles. The modern Ceylon, the Arabic for Shiloh, a mass of shapeless ruins. Here, the tabernacle was set up after the conquest. There we go. That's why it rung a bell. Okay. Where it remained during all the period of the judges till the ark fell into the hands of the Philistines. No spot in central Palestine could be more secluded than this early sanctuary. Nothing more featureless than the landscape around. So featureless indeed, the landscape, and so secluded, the spot, that from the time of St. Jerome till its rediscovery by Dr. Robinson and yada yada yada. Cool. Anyway, there's a bit on Shiloh. So that's where the tabernacle was placed after the conquest during the time of Joshua. But Ahijah could not see, for his eyes were set by reason of age. Right. So similar to with Isaac, as he got older, his vision, started to leave. And the Lord Yahweh said unto Ahijah, Behold, the wife of Jeroboam cometh to ask a thing of thee for her son. For he is sick. Thus and thus shalt thou say unto her, for it shall be when she cometh in, that she shall feign herself to be another woman. So the Lord already told Ahijah what was going to happen. And obviously, Jeroboam's wife doesn't know this. Her whole mindset is she's acting like she's another woman, about to ask about her child, and so on. Verse 6, and it was so, that when Ahijah heard the sound of her feet, as she came in at the door, that he said, Come in, thou wife of Jeroboam. Why feignest thou thyself to be another? For I am sent to thee with heavy tidings. Go, tell Jeroboam, Thus saith the Lord Yahweh, God of Israel, Forasmuch as I exalted thee from among the people, and made thee prince over my people Israel, and rent the kingdom away from the house of David, and gave it to thee. And yet thou hast not been as my servant David, who kept my commandments, and who followed me with all his heart, to do that only which was right in mine eyes. But thou hast done evil above all that were before thee. For thou hast gone and made thee other gods, and molten images, to provoke me to anger, and cast me behind thy back. And truly so, right? That is what the Lord told Jeroboam, that if he would follow the Lord, right, and serve the Lord, then hey, the Lord would establish him, right, a sure house as like David. But this guy went the complete, like this dude did a whole 180, made it his mission to do the opposite of what the Lord told him. Therefore, behold, I will bring evil upon the house of Jeroboam, and will cut off from Jeroboam him that pisseth against the wall, which are the males, right? And actually, let's see, I think there should be some information on this if we search it up. Pisseth against the wall, Jewish. I'm not quite sure if this is an idiom, but it'll tell us what it actually is. Okay. It says it was evidently a proverbial expression in Israel, probably applied to those men who were of such arrogant and evil temperament as to blatantly engage in public urination against the walls of those they disliked. Interesting. See what we got over here. Several times in the King James Version of the Bible, we find the colorful phrase, pisseth against the wall. To piss is to urinate, so the verses referring to someone who pisseth against the wall could read urinates against the wall. We should note that the word piss is considered vulgar today. Okay, cool. So it says here, this was an idiomatic expression used in ancient Israel. It referred to males, which makes sense, who are the only ones who can urinate against walls. When someone in the Bible refers to someone else pissing against a wall, it's understood that the person urinating is a male and not a female. Some interpreters detected an added nuance in the phrase. It's possible that the main reference is to dogs, since male dogs often urinate on vertical surfaces. The application of the phrase to men would then carry the idea that the men in question were ignoble individuals of low character. All in all, right, I think the main point here is when it refers to pissing against the wall, it's dealing with males, right? Because if you just think about it, here's an example, right? When you go as a man, right, you go to a public restroom. Look at how the stalls are set up, and look at how the thing that you urinate into is. If it's not a toilet bowl, it's something that is parallel to the wall. And when you take a leak, you're quite literally pissing against the wall, right? And then it goes down into the little, holder, bucket, whatever, drain, whatever, right? Let me see if I can find public. Yeah, never mind. You know what I'm talking about. So there you go. Anyway, so why is the Lord talking about cutting off from Jeroboam him that pisseth against the wall? Because I forget if it's in this chapter or a previous one, but a part of the judgment, I think this was something that the man of God in the previous chapter mentioned. The Lord would but I could be wrong, right? But the Lord will cut off basically the line of Jeroboam. And we know the line is passed through the seed, which is carried by the males. So by cutting off him that pisseth against the wall, or in other words, the males of Jeroboam's family line, there would be nobody else left to pass on that seed and carry on that lineage. Okay. It says here, and him that is shut up and left in Israel, and will take away the remnant of the house of Jeroboam, as a man taketh away dung, till it be all gone. So, explaining the point that I just mentioned. Him that dieth of Jeroboam in the city shall the dogs eat, and him that dieth in the field shall the fowls of the air eat, for the Lord Yahweh hath spoken it. And what that means is they're not going to get a proper burial. Similar to Jezebel. Arise thou therefore, and this is what Ahijah told the wife of Jeroboam, and that's why he told her that I've been sent unto you with heavy tidings. Arise thou therefore, get thee to thine own house, and when thy feet enter into the city, the child shall die. And all Israel shall mourn for him and bury him. Yeah, because he was the son of the king. For he only of Jeroboam shall come to the grave, because in him there is found some good thing toward the Lord Yahweh, God of Israel, in the house of Jeroboam. So that son, that child of Jeroboam who's going to die, he's the only one that's going to get a proper burial, as it says, come to the grave, because as we read up above, the rest wouldn't. Now, for what reason there was some good found toward the Lord, whether the spirit in the child was one of, a righteous individual, or, whether he was just so young he hadn't committed any iniquity to, piss off the Lord, it's not entirely clear, but for whatever reason it is. Verse 14, moreover, the Lord Yahweh shall raise him up a king over Israel, who shall cut off the house of Jeroboam that day. But what? Even now. And we will see that as we keep on reading. Okay, and I believe the scriptures make a point of of mentioning that as a fulfillment of what was said over here. Let's look at this here in the NLT, right? It says, in addition, the Lord Yahweh will raise up a king over Israel who will destroy the family of Jeroboam. This will happen today, even now. Ooh. For the Lord Yahweh shall, and meaning, and this could mean, right, that whoever it is the Lord is going to raise up could happen today. The Lord could appoint somebody to do that. Verse 15, for the Lord Yahweh shall smite Israel as a reed is shaken in the water. And he shall, and let's look up this word shaken. To shake, waver, move, to move. Let's see. What do we have in these other translations here? Yeah, that makes more sense. The Lord will shake Israel like a reed whipped about in a stream. You can imagine if you take a reed, like a little one of those special kinds of branches, and you like slap it against the top of the water. That's how the Lord is going to smite Israel. And he shall root up Israel out of this good land, which he gave to their fathers, and shall scatter them beyond the river, which is the Euphrates. Typically, when it refers to the river, they are referring to the Euphrates. Because they have made their groves, provoking the Lord Yahweh to anger. Let's take a look here. Yeah, so you can see even in the NLT, they already, put the word Euphrates in there. ESV, same thing. Now, ultimately, we know that this ends up happening, right? When the Assyrians finally come up into power, they become like this dominant force in this, and I'm referring mainly to the Neo-Assyrian Empire, right? Let's look up Neo-Assyrian, and we'll get to their time as well. But if we look here, right, it says here, the Neo-Assyrian Empire was the fourth and penultimate stage of ancient Assyrian history, beginning with the ascension of Adad-nirari II in 912 BC. But I believe it isn't until, let me see if they talk about their peak. Okay, it says here, the Neo-Assyrian Empire grew to dominate the Near East, the ancient Near East, and parts of South Caucasus, North Africa, and Eastern Mediterranean throughout much of the 9th to 7th centuries BC. So that's around like the ending of, when you start counting down from like 9, 11, 9, 10, 9, 8, all the way down, they really start, getting out there, right, around the 800s BC. Okay, 800s into 700s, that's when they start expanding, and then they start having contact with Israel up until the time of Tiglath-Pileser III, and then, Shalmaneser V and Sargon II. And at that point, that's where, we know they put an end to the kingdom of Israel and deport them over to the regions in Assyria. And that's that point beyond the river. Verse 16. And so technically Ahijah prophesied about that, about them being, like it says, scattered them beyond the river, right? Them being taken out of the land. That's what it says here, right? He shall root up Israel out of this good land. And he shall give Israel up because of the sins of Jeroboam, who did sin, and who made Israel to sin. And Jeroboam's wife arose and departed, and came to Tirzah. And when she came to the threshold of the door, the child died. And they buried him, and all Israel mourned for him, according to the word of the Lord Yahweh. And at this point, all Israel would likely have to be northern, like, let's think of it like this, right? The kingdom is split now. So you have the kingdom of Judah, ruled by Rehoboam, and the kingdom of Israel, ruled by Jeroboam. So at this point, that all Israel makes sense to be the kingdom of Israel. According to the, where we at? Yeah. And they buried him, and all Israel mourned for him, according to the word of the Lord Yahweh. which he spake by the hand of his servant Ahijah the prophet. Let's actually look up what Ahijah's name means over here. That's that Yah. Oh wow. Brother of Yahweh. So you have Yah and Ach, right? Brother. Ach Yah, my brother, Ach, brother. And then Yah here is short for Yahweh. Interesting. Cool. Verse 19. And the rest of the acts of Jeroboam, how he warred, and how he reigned, behold, they are written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel. And the days of Jeroboam, or the days which Jeroboam reigned, were 22 years. So that's 22 years. And he slept with his fathers, and Nadab, his son, reigned in his stead. And sure, I don't need to clarify, but that's a different son, right? One of his sons died. There's another one here who ends up, inheriting the throne. Verse 21. And Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, reigned in Judah. Rehoboam was 41 years old when he began to reign. And he reigned 17 years in Jerusalem, the city which the Lord Yahweh did choose out of all the tribes of Israel to put his name there. And his mother's name was Naamah, an Ammonitess. Because remember, Solomon loved many strange women. And Judah did evil in the sight of the Lord Yahweh, and they provoked him to jealousy with their sins which they had committed, above all that their fathers had done. So not only was Israel going off, Judah as well. For they also built them high places, and images, and groves, on every high hill, and under every green tree. And going back to the point that was made earlier, yes, Jeroboam exacerbated the idolatry in Israel by building those golden calves. But it's not to say that there wasn't idolatry going on prior to that. Remember, King Solomon had built the groves, and what's interesting is he had wives of the Edomites. Wait, I'm actually, hold up. Let me not butcher that. Let's see, Solomon loved. And because I think okay, so I'm not bugging. He had wives of the Edomites, right? The Ammonites, the Moabites, the Zidonians, the Hittites. So, and then it tells you that he built idols, like, places of worship for those wives so they could worship their gods. So now you can imagine what's happening in Israel by doing this. You have, and it mentions Ashtoreth and the Milcom and the different deities that these different nations served. But now they've all been culminated in the land of Israel because of Solomon's building of the different, altars and so on and so forth for them. So of course you're going to have it throughout the land of Judah and Israel, this exposure to the different idols. And that's why it makes sense that even, prior to Jeroboam doing what he did, and though Rehoboam was the one ruling in the land, in Judah, there was still this idolatry going on. There were still these high places they built, and these groves and these idols that they worshipped. Verse 23, for they also built them high places and images and groves on every high hill and under every green tree. And the grove is really like a collection of trees, that's like that. If you let me just pull it up here for those that are not aware. Groves. Yeah. So you can see here's an example. It's really just like a collection of trees, and they would go up there and do that wickedness. And there were also Sodomites in the land, and they did according to all the abominations of the nations, which the Lord Yahweh cast out before the children of Israel. So just like today you see Jake being Sodomites, yeah, well, guess what? They were doing it back there too, even going as far back as during the time of the immediate reign after King Solomon. And it came to pass in the 5th year of King Rehoboam that Shishak, king of Egypt, came up against Jerusalem. And he took away the treasures of the house of the Lord Yahweh and the treasures of the king's house. He even took away all. And he took away all the shields of gold which Solomon had made. And Rehoboam made in their stead brazen shields and committed them onto the hands of the chief of the guard, which kept the door at the king's house. Now there's actual, secular records of this, and the association here of this Shishak is with an individual in secular history known as Shoshenq, right? So the spelling is slightly different, but he's not the first one to be referred to by a different name in the scriptures versus in secular history. It says here, king of Egypt, Shishak. Okay, here's another variation of the spelling. The first king of Bubasite or Bubastite, 22nd dynasty, this is Egypt, ruled in Egypt during the reigns of Solomon and Rehoboam, and attacked the southern kingdom under Rehoboam and apparently made it tributary. Now, before I go ahead and read some more, let's see if we can get a bit more. And let's take a look at the Easton's Bible Dictionary. So we're looking for Shishak. Here we go. Okay, so they don't give too much on here. So let's take a look at, I pulled up Shishak and some information we have on him here. You have biblical Shishak, and I think this is some pretty interesting information here. So I'll read it real quick. It says here, the foreign policy that they had, he pursued an aggressive foreign policy in the ancient territories of the Middle East toward the end of his reign. This is attested in part by the discovery of a statue bearing his name from the Lebanese city of Byblos, part of a monumental stela from Megiddo. And a stela is basically like a it could be stone, but it's like an object that has inscriptions in it, bearing his name, and a list of cities in the region comprising Syria, Philistia, Phoenicia, the Negev, and the Kingdom of Israel, among various topographical lists inscribed on the walls of temples of Amun at Al-Hiba and Karnak. The fragment of a stela bearing his cartouche, and this, I believe it's, let me actually just pull it up here. So it's, as you can see, an oval with a line at one end tangent to it, and it's indicating that whatever writing or text is inside of that oval is a royal name. From Megiddo has been interpreted as a monument Shoshenq erected there to commemorate his victory. So this is basically a archaeological find of the cities that was conquered, or that were conquered by this Shoshenq, that he then recorded down, and that includes Israel. Some of these conquered cities include ancient Israelite fortresses such as Megiddo, Taanach, and Shechem. There are other problems with Shoshenq being the same as the biblical Shishak, and this goes into, as with everything, right, that is historical based, archaeological based, there's always different sides, right? Some people say, no, that doesn't make sense because of X, Y, and Z. Some people say, oh, but then this is back and forth. All right. So it says here, Shoshenq's Karnak list does not include Jerusalem, his biggest prize according to the Bible. His list focuses on places either north or south of Judah, as if he did not raid the center. The fundamental problem facing historians is establishing the aims of the two accounts and linking up the information in them. So you have some that make the claim that, well, this Shoshenq can't be the same Shishak in the Bible who we just read about here in 1 Kings 14 that raided or came against Jerusalem and took all the gold shields and so on. And the reason being, in the records here that he listed of the cities that he conquered, he doesn't mention Jerusalem, but he does mention other parts in Judah. Of course, I mean, with that being said, that's still not viable proof, right? That's still an assumption to say, well, because he didn't mention Jerusalem, it means that he didn't raid Jerusalem or he wasn't the king who did it. There's still no definitive proof of that, right? That's an assumption. And you could say, well, you would think that if you accomplish such a victory like this, you would have it written with the other names. But then there's various reasons as to why that could have been the case. So others believe, or let me read this actually. There have been some possible suggestions and proposals from scholars regarding this issue. Some argue that the mention of Jerusalem was erased from the list over time. Others believe that Rehoboam's tribute to Shoshenq saved the city from destruction and therefore from the Bubastite portals lists. So in this case, to say, all right, Jerusalem isn't mentioned on the list of cities that were, taken over by Shishak because of the tribute that they ended up paying. Some scholars even propose that Shoshenq claimed a conquest that he did not enact and copied the list of conquered territories from an old pharaoh's conquered list. As an addendum to his foreign policy, Shoshenq the first carved a report of campaigns in Nubia and Israel, with a detailed list of conquests in Israel. This is the first military action outside Egypt, formally commemorated for several centuries. So what's interesting here, or I think the focal point here is, you have archaeological, because how did they know all this information? Here's an example for you. This, as you can see here, is in a very ancient language. It says here, this is the triumphal relief of Shoshenq I near the Bubastite portal at Karnak, depicting the god Amun-Re, which I believe that's Amun-Ra, receiving a list of cities and villages conquered by the king, which would be Shoshenq or Shishak, in his Near East military campaigns. And on that list included cities in Israel. So we have a historical record in the scriptures talking about this. And then you have this also being recorded by other nations via, inscriptions and stelas and so on that we now have today. So there's still sufficient proof of the existence of these nations, these peoples, and the occurrence of these events that we're reading about in here. So you have some people that will say, oh, but the Bible was written by man. We're not going to get into that. But the point is, there's more than enough substantial proof of the events in the scriptures. So coming back to where we were in 1 Kings 14 and 27. And King Rehoboam made in their stead, I read that, 28. And it was so, when the king went into the house of the Lord Yahweh, that the guard bare them, and brought them back into the guard chamber. Now the rest of the acts of Rehoboam, and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? And there was war between Rehoboam and Jeroboam all their days. And Rehoboam slept with his fathers, and was buried with his fathers in the city of David. And his mother's name was Naamah, an Ammonitess, and Abijam his son reigned in his stead. So at this point, the king of Israel, Jeroboam, died. The king of Judah, Rehoboam, ended up dying, right? Now I'm not saying at this very point in time, but I'm saying at the end of 1 Kings 14, that's basically where we're leaving off at, right? And their two sons, Jeroboam's son, I gotta go back and take a look at his name, and Rehoboam's son, Abijam, is now reigning. I think it was Nadab, Jeroboam's son. Let's see. Oops. Yeah, Nadab. So that brings us to the end of the book of 1 Kings, the 14th chapter. Lord willing, this was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Recha Kodash. And until next time, Shalom.